Hello, MacLaren. My name is Mrs. Hrbacek, and today I would like to talk to you a little bit about the life of Martin Luther King Jr. as we're going to celebrate his day next Monday. I won't say too much about him as you will study him in ninth grade Humane Letters, but there is still plenty to learn about this amazing man. Born in Atlanta, Georgia on January 15th, 1929, as Michael King Jr., he was son to Baptist pastor Michael King Sr. and Alberta Williams King, a schoolteacher. His father later changed his name and his son's name to Martin Luther in honor of the leading figure of the Reformation in the 1500s. His father was fiercely opposed to segregation, a system of laws passed in the South that relegated Black people to second-class citizens. Martin Luther King Sr.'s conviction was born from his personal experience as a Black American. Martin Luther King Sr. believed all forms of racism were against God's will and human nature. This was a belief in which his son was immersed at a very young age. MLK Sr. was the leader of the local branch of the NAACP and worked publicly and privately for the end of segregation. Martin Luther King Jr. tells the story of his father leaving a shoe shop because he and his son were asked to leave their seats so that white people could sit in them. He said, "This was the first time I had seen Dad so furious. That experience revealed to me at a very early age that my father had not adjusted to the system, and he played a great part in shaping my conscience. I still remember walking down the street beside him as he muttered, 'I don't care how long I have to live with this system. I will never accept it.'" King Jr. began his public school education at age 5, already knowing how to read because his mother had taught him. He attended Booker T. Washington High School. Mr. Washington was part of the last generation of African Americans born into slavery, freed, and then who became essential voices in advocating a kind of equality for former slaves. At this high school, King Jr. showed much promise, even skipping 9th and 11th grades and entering Morehouse College at the age of 15. That's the age of many of our 9th and 10th graders. After receiving his degree in 1948, King attended Crozier Theological Seminary. This was his first experience at an integrated school of both Black and whites. He studied hard and graduated at the top of his class, the valedictorian, in 1951. King went on to pursue doctoral studies at Boston University, and there he met Coretta Scott, a student at the Conservatory of Music. The two were married in 1953 and would eventually have a family of 4 children. In 1954, King became a Baptist pastor in Alabama while still working toward his doctorate, which he earned in 1955 at the age of 25. It was after that year that he commenced his crusade as an outspoken leader of the civil rights movement. He would live only 13 more years after that. He was involved in boycotts, marches, peaceful protests, and sit-ins. He was arrested over 20 times. He wrote and spoke prolifically, taking the American society to task for its racism. King Jr. reflected about the authors he read and their influence on him in forming his ideas about justice and human beings. He read many familiar names to us: Plato, Aristotle, Luther, Locke, Hobbes, and Rousseau, among a few. He read the economic theorists like Bentham and Mill. Of special influence to him were Hegel, Marx, Thoreau, and Gandhi. He tried to see with clarity what he could learn from each, but struggled to decide how to understand the world and what he could hope from it. He vacillated between despair about the state of the human race and optimistic confidence in the power of love and peace for the future of man. However, as he struggled, he allowed for nuance. He did not call himself a Marxist or a Hobbesian or a Lockean. Even Gandhi and Thoreau, whose ideas became the hallmark of his activism, he did not take wholesale. He thought hard and was open and sought truth wherever he found it. He said many things about receiving a liberal arts education, and he struggled to find his place in it all. However, one thing he did say is that there is one phase of liberalism that I hope to cherish always. Its devotion to the search for truth, its insistence on an open and analytical mind, and its refusal to abandon the best light of reason. Martin Luther King Jr. was shot on the balcony of a motel in Tennessee on April 4th, 1968. He was supposed to join a march of striking sanitation workers. He had been focusing his effort on urban poverty, particularly among Black people. He was 39 years old when he died. Now, Martin Luther King had been receiving death threats as early as 1953. People attempted to bomb his house many times, and he was stabbed in 1958. So he had been living for a long time with threats on his life. One of his close friends, Ralph Abernathy, asked him how he wanted to be remembered after his death. He said, "I'd like someone to mention that Martin Luther King Jr. tried to give his life serving others." Thank you.